Welcome to Hideaki Anno, Evangelion and Beyond, created by me, Jackson Bell. And fun fact, this was actually the first panel I ever created back in 2017. And when I last presented this panel back in 2021, so 5 years ago, and I was like, ugh. And then I revised the entire thing, basically. It was rough originally, but enough reminiscing, let's actually get started on why you're here. So before we begin this panel, we have to ask the big question. Who even is Hideaki Anno? Well, Hideaki Anno is an animator, actor, director, and writer best known for dark works that combine deconstructive cynicism with faint glimmers of hope and an idealistic sense of love. Born May 25th, 1960 in Ube, Yamaguchi, Japan, Anno does many other things. He's a vegetarian, which is a recurring theme in a lot of his works, and he's very self-deprecating and shy. As a result, he uses his works as ways to communicate with his audience. Anno's mention of art was inspired by several different media, including but not limited to the works of Jerry Anderson, such as Thunderbirds and UFO, kaiju movies and tokusatsu shows like various Godzilla movies, and Ultraman. In fact, Anno is such a huge Ultraman fan that he made a parody fan film in college with himself playing Ultraman. Yoshiyuki Tomino's giant mech anime like Space Runaway Arion, and of course, Mobile Suit Gundam. The manga of Go Nagai, his favorite being the one and only Devil Man. And finally, he was a big fan of World War II history, particularly movies, with the Battle of Okinawa being his favorite film of all time. So when it comes to Anno's works, he's a huge fan of 6 scenes in particular. Ominous villains with no clear motives or backstory, giant monsters not of this universe, a lot of technobabble, exposition, and philosophical monologues, very surreal imagery and post-apocalyptic scenery, protagonists with severe emotional issues who want to overcome their struggles and become better people, and finally, classical public domain music, though at times he'll just reuse music from his earlier works. So now that we got all that out of the way, let's start from the top. Before we got into directing, Anno attended the Osaka University of Arts. While there, he helped animate Super Dimension Fortress Macross, and made the Daikon 3 and 4 opening animations with his classmates. Both intros are shot on 8mm and would become cult hits at festivals and conventions. However, Anno was later expelled from college and failing to pay for his tuition. Starting for a job, Anno answered a newspaper ad for an animator at Studio Topcraft, known for their collaborations with Rankin Bass like The Last Unicorn. There, he met Hayao Miyazaki, who would become not only Anno's mentor, but a close friend as well. While working at Topcraft, Anno animated The God Warrior for 1984's Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind. Miyazaki chose him because he was pleased with his apocalyptic drawings. After that film, Miyazaki took 70% of Topcraft's staff and formed Studio Ghibli. Anno was not one of those staff, so he turned around and took 10% of the remaining staff to rebrand a failing studio. Thus led to the creation of Studio Gainax. Gainax was created when the animators who left with Anno helped take over Daikon Film Studio in 1984 and changed its name to Gainax. Gainax's name has many different origins, but basically boils down to it sounded cool. Gainax pushed boundaries of animation storytelling, with the added bonus being that it was all its co-founders were huge anime nerds who just wanted to make anime themselves. Gainax was known back then for several things, of which we'll get into throughout the panel, but they boasted shows with impressive animation, gripping stories, and out-of-nowhere endings. Oh, and lots of movies. Can't forget that. Through Gainax, Anno worked as an animator for various projects, such as the World Space Force, for working on his first big project as a director. So this was Gunbuster, a 6-episode OVA from 1988, it served as Anno's first directing job at Gainax. Anno got the gig due to the previous director pulling out before the show started, and I guess they were in a hurry to find a replacement. The OVA is set in the far-out futuristic year of 2023, where mankind and aliens are engaged in galactic warfare. Noriko Takaya, the klutzy daughter of a famed and deceased ship captain, is chosen to pilot a giant mech with the fate of the Earth on the line. There she encounters friendship, rivals, the harshness of war, and sacrifice. The show was previously licensed by Bandai Visual, but since been picked up by the fine folks at Discotech, who also gave it a proper English dub. The OVA proved to be a success, showing that Gainax could tell a dark story with his signature over-the-top moments and tropes. Its success kickstarted Anno's career as an anime director. Its themes of war, tragedy, and sacrifice, all told through a sci-fi lens, would set the stage for Anno's future work. A sequel OVA titled Diebuster was released to coincide with both the original OVA's 15th anniversary and Gainax's 20th. So that was Anno's first time as a director, but that was just an OVA. Anno would soon direct his own television series, one that would have a domino effect on not only his career as an artist, but also his life. So this show was Nadia, the Secret of Blue Water, which is originally based on an outline by Hayao Miyazaki from the 1970s, who would use elements of the show in his 1986 film Castle in the Sky. The show was given an honor to work on by television channel NHK, who basically the Japanese equivalent to BBC, with Gainax to animate it. The show aired in 1990, lasting for 39 episodes. Set in the year 1889, a young engineer named Jean meets a circus girl of mysterious origin named Nadia. The two set out to discover Nadia's past and the perplexing power of the blue water gem she wields. With the help of Captain Nemo and friends, the two must protect the gem from the evil Lord Gargoyle and his army of Neo-Atlanteans. The anime is previously licensed and dubbed by ADV Films, but over the years, it's now in the hands of G-Kids. Now, the anime is heavily influenced by the works of French novelist Jules Verne, namely 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Captain Nemo and his submarine, the Nautilus, are taken directly from the book. Anno definitely followed Miyazaki's notes closely, as it has a lot of the latter's hallmarks, not just in the look and feel. It's a show about the goods and evils of technology, and it has a lot of we must protect nature moments. But at the same time, Anno put a lot of himself into the series. Nadia is a vegetarian like Anno, and thus wants to help preserve life as much as she can. And more importantly, the ongoing conflict is a war between humans and Neo-Atlanteans, who are basically the clan, just a bunch of bigots in pointy white hoods. But the series combines Miyazaki's themes about technology with Anno's themes about war, creating a nice interplay between how technology is only really bad depending on the person using it. But speaking of wars, Nadia itself would face one between Anno, Gainax, and NHK. Nadia sadly marked the start of Anno's productions facing loads of bad luck and misfortune. Here, it was mainly due to severe creative differences between Gainax and NHK that hurt the show's quality. So remember when I said that the show was 39 episodes? Well, you can thank NHK for that. They extended the episode count from 27 to 39, leading to the hugely disliked Island and Africa filler arcs, which didn't have Anno's nor Gainax's involvement. They were instead farmed out to a studio in Korea, which you can tell by the suddenly cheap animation quality. Anno himself played both arcs non-canon, except for episodes 30 and 31. But even before that, Anno rewrote the original script due to disliking it. In anime, initially an optimistic series, grew progressively dark due to Anno's dislike of NHK trying to make the show quote-unquote better. Many episodes also ran late due to Anno's perfectionism, meaning that he spent 18 hours per day on the show, with one episode coming out a month later than usual. And finally, the show was very expensive to produce. Since Gainax were the ones footing the bill, they lost 800 million yen in finances, which is half a million US dollars. Despite all these problems, the show was a huge success in ratings. However, there will be one final kick in the crotch. Gainax would deny the show's rights. Instead, Toho owned them and refused to give them up to Gainax, meaning they wouldn't receive any revenue from the show's success. Gainax was treated as a mere work for hire instead of a creative partner, and were financially in the red by the time the show ended. A sequel movie titled Nadia, the Secret of Blue Water, the motion picture, was released in 1992 to poor reviews. Anno and Gainax only contributed to plot and some character designs. Anno compiled a 6-hour cut of the show that removed all the filler arcs called the Nautilus story, but it was released only in Japan and only on VHS and Laserdisc. But the stress of working with a tight schedule combined with having no creative control caused Anno to suffer a 4-year bout of depression after the show's end in 1991. And all this mental stress culminated in Anno's controversial masterpiece. Yes, we finally arrived at the End Genesis Evangelion, which was released in 1995 and lasted for 26 episodes. So the plot involves Shinji Ikari, an ordinary kid who severely lacks confidence with himself. One day, his aloof dad Gendo summons him to Tokyo 3 to work for NERV, a company that allows kids to fight giant alien creatures known as angels using giant robots called Evangelion units. The units must stop the angels from causing the end of the world, aka Third Impact. Without getting into serious spoilers, let's just say that things go wrong. In fact, things go really, really wrong. The show is initially licensed by ADV Films, but like Nadia, the series is now owned by G-Kids. After stress of working on Nadia and the failure to kickstart a sequel to World Space Force in 1999, Anno went through a lengthy bout of depression. He even described himself throughout this period as a broken man who could do nothing for 4 years. Gainax were also on death's door by this point. They already lost money on Nadia, but key staff members had also left, and projects were getting canceled due to lack of funding. But one day, Anno ran into a man named Toshimichi Otsuki, an executive at King Records, who promised to fund a new anime for Gainax. So Anno got to work making Evangelion. but it was going to be anything but an ordinary anime. Anno wanted to create a very psychological series using the basis of Gunbuster, based on a plot in his battle of depression and his futile attempts at running away from his own problems. Anno envisioned the series as a combination of Space Runaway Ideon and Devilman, with a bit of Nagai's Monster Z thrown in. And Evangelion is the complete product of Hideaki Anno. He was the showrunner, he directed and co-wrote every episode, it was his baby. Now, unlike Nadia, which is more bombastic and whimsical, Eva is more slow-paced, surreal, and psychological, being made for a slightly older audience. The show starts out as a thought-provoking tribute to classic mech anime, similar to Gunbuster, though it doesn't take long for things to get worse for the characters. Anno built the show around a state of mind at the time, meaning the already pessimistic setting gets even more bleak from there. The series is known for dissecting and deconstructing the typical tropes found in giant robot shows of its ilk. In any other story, Shinji and his father Gendo would be working close to each other out of love and respect, but here, they're coldly distant, and their relationship had been fragmented for years due to the death of Shinji's mother. The main villains, the ominous organization SEAL, aren't mustache-twirling masterminds, but a cabal of unidentifiable men who believe that constant extinction of humanity will actually benefit the world. And finally, the angels are portrayed as creatures beyond our comprehension, and sending children out to fight them with the fate of humanity on their shoulders is shown to not help their already fragile mental states. Now, it was also at this during the show where Anno got to meet Kazuya Tsurumaki. Born in 1966, Tsurumaki is an animator for Gainax, Anno's understudy, and his intended successor. He met Anno during the making of Eva, where he was an assistant director. And Tsurumaki's no slouch. He's the creator of Fooly, and he would go on to direct Die Buster. If nothing else, Tsurumaki helped make Eva a bit less stressful for Anno, because at this point in time, Anno's dealing with some very personal issues. Namely, the production problems, some of the worst in his career. Anno's ongoing depression made the show even more darker than originally intended, so Eva was moved to a different time slot due to the increasingly graphic content. Anno refused to adhere to the network's orders and toned the show down out of artistic integrity, leading the sponsors billing out the further the show went off the deep end. Because sponsors were pulling out, Gainax was losing money working on the series, so a lot had to be scrapped. The series became less action-focused and more cerebral, thanks in part to Anno reading a lot of books about psychology. Many angels were scrapped, and what's frightening was that during production, the Amshin called Subway Attack happened, and a very similar plot point was going to happen in the show, so Anno decided how to rewrite the entire plot after episode 16. The series was losing so much money, and its production was so off the rails, that Gainax executives were even wondering if the show had to be cancelled. But the odd thing was that Evangelion was still a rating success. Toy sales were great, and there was a ton of merchandising for it, so how could Gainax be losing money off of a hit like this? Well, you thank our good friend, embezzlement. So another reason why Gainax is losing money is because of a joint effort between the company's president, Takeshi Sawamura, and the studio's tax accountant, Yoshikatsu Iwasaki. The two were embezzling the revenue earned from Eva for themselves ever since the show started, and wouldn't take until a few years after the show's release for both men to be arrested on charges of tax fraud, having failed to pay 560 million yen in corporate taxes. Let's turn back to the show. One of the biggest things that people know about the series is its ending. The final two episodes were not at all what the initial audience were expecting, and while some liked it, a lot of fans were confused, angered, and not very happy with what was presented. They wanted something more action-packed, or what they instead got was the exact opposite. Again, without getting into serious spoiler territory, the finale is completely separate from where the show's plot was heading at that point. It acted as an introspective, psychological examination of Shinji's worldview that ended on a pretty optimistic note. Shinji actually grows up, he learns to love himself and appreciate those around him. But that's not what made the ending so talked about. Notably, the animation is very limited, with a lot of focus on dialogue, simple line drawings, and stock footage. Rumors circulated that it was a result of Gainax's financial woes, but it was later clarified that Anno did have an ending plan, but since deadlines were nearing, he had to think of something more small scale. And the finale was certainly something. Despite the controversy surrounding the ending and behind-the-scenes problems, the show managed to be Gainax's biggest success. In fact, the show was such a success, it literally saved the anime industry after the box office failures of Akira and Royal Space Force. Gainax were able to get their stuff together and persevere for many more years. The series is seen as groundbreaking, influencing many more psychologically driven and deconstructive stories. Many artists like Jonah Vasquez, Wes Anderson, and Robin Williams were noted fans, with Vasquez's work in particular taking many cues from Eva. But, I'm sorry to keep harping on it, that ending was seriously controversial. Nowadays, its reputation isn't nearly as bad as it was back then. In fact, I find that people today seem to appreciate it more because of how different it is, and how in a way, it does fit with the rest of the series. But when it first aired in Japan, Holy shit, fans were so up in arms that Anno received death threats, though they would soon get their wish, as Gainax got to work on bringing Anno's original ending to life. And what we got from that was...
For whom to lose, though full of pain, this intellectual being, those thoughts that wander through eternity, to perish rather, swallowed up and lost, in the wide womb of uncreated night.
Fate of destruction is also the joy of rebirth.
The battle has been joined. With a host of Evas under their direct command, the military might of the Cell organization stands poised to wrest control of Nerve's greatest achievement, Eva Unit 1. It alone holds the key to humanity's final fate. But the ultimate choice to cast out the world we know rests with one young man. Beyond jealousy and betrayal, beyond hate and desire, beyond pain and death, lies the ultimate revelation. The final choice. The end. Manga Entertainment presents the highly anticipated conclusion to the Neon Genesis Evangelion saga.
Mercy, we have begun third impact.
The End of Evangelion.
So this was the End of Evangelion, which is a theatrically released alternate ending to the series from 1997. The movie was also co-animated by Production IG, the first of many collaborations between them and Gainax. Here, the Evil Seal organization are trying to trigger third impact by storming into Nerve and unleashing the full power of the Eva units, and it's up to Shinji to decide the fate of the world. So in true Eva fashion, the movie set out to resolve the series' dangling plot threads in the most bleakest and confusing way possible. This is Anno's first official movie he got to direct, so what a good way to start. Yep.
Oh yeah. I originally thought that End of Evangelion, what was happening outside of Shinji's brain, what the ending in the anime, what was happening inside his head, but they would coincide with each other.
Oh, now I'll get to that
Okay.
in a bit, don't worry. But the movie was previously licensed by Manga Entertainment, but like every other Eva property, it's now owned by G-Kids. So one thing you need to know about End of Eva was that it was originally meant to be a companion OVA for a project known as Evangelion Death and Rebirth. But after some financiers came in and increased the budget based on the show's popularity, it was turned into a big event movie. The movie itself is ultimately an exercise in creative freedom. Without TV broadcast censors breathing down their necks, Gainax were allowed to get away with whatever they wanted. As such, the plot's pretty bleak, containing far more graphic violence, sexual scenarios, and adult language than the original series, plus some imagery that, let's just say, would have been very unsponsor friendly. But after End of Eva's release, there was one big question surrounding it. Was this a payback movie? So a big consensus of the movie, especially back then, was that it was meant to be a jab at fans who hated the show's ending, and was thus made darker as a response to the backlash and hate Anno received. Here, big name characters are killed off, and the movie ends on a far more bizarre and downer note than the show. However, over the years, there's been a lot of stuff that came out to put these theories to rest. And in a way, it ties back into Anno's inspirations and who he is as a person. For one thing, big name characters getting killed off had already been done several times by the likes of Ushicon Tomino, with Space Runaway Adion ended in a similar fashion. The ending being bleak as it could also be, the ending being as bleak as it is, could also have been a callback to Devilman's equally tragic ending. Both are very similar from a visual and thematic standpoint, and it wouldn't surprise me if Anno was subconsciously influenced by that manga's apocalyptic finale. And then there's an infamous sequence where a bunch of real-life letters addressed to Anno flash across the screen, with many English speakers interpreting them as hate mail from Japanese fans disgruntled with the show's ending. However, it turns out that not only were the letters, only one of the letters was hate mail, and due to legal reasons, none of them were actually letters. In fact, all the letters shown in the sequence were actually based on the actually positive ones. I mean, it's hard to read here, but this one's actually based on a letter that thanked Anno for making such a life-changing show. So yeah, this franchise is literally Hideaki Anno wearing his heart on his sleeve. It's about the connection between creators and his fans, and, you know, whether you like it or not, it's still really interesting, just the whole humanity aspect to it. So upon the movie's release, it was critically adored, but the ending was deemed, of course, controversial by the fans. Some thought it was a better conclusion than the show, others thought it was too depressing and weird. But despite that, the movie, like the show, are going to have an equally lasting impact. Going back to Jonah Vasquez, the Invaders Zim Christmas episode is basically a remake of End of Evangelion. Like almost the exact same plot, almost the same shots too. And I just really want to preface this because for a long time, this movie was misinterpreted as a replacement for the show's ending. In reality, both endings are integral to understanding the show, even if they don't happen simultaneously. The show's ending is introspective, while the movie's is more extrospective. They both complement each other in their own unique way. After the movie's release, Anno decided to take a break from animation and mentally recover. Anno decided that he wanted to get into live-action film directing. He already had experience during his time in college, so with his newfound fame, why not make some more? And thanks to the rise of cheap digital cameras, he was able to make his dream into a reality with...
1997年7月19日の朝に吉井ひろみが見た夢。会ったことのないデブの男がとても高い山の中腹の小道で看守にキノコ取りをさせられている。何か修行のようでもあるし罰のようでもある。キノコは見たこともない形でシューマイに似ている。非常に乾燥していて表面に粉を吹いている。2カ所でキノコを採取した後、デブの男は
So Anno's first live-action movie was Love and Pop, which is a 1998 movie based on Ryu Murakami's 1996 novel of the same name. And for those who don't know, Murakami wrote the book that Takashi Miike's audition was based on. The movie centered around a high school girl, Hiromi Yoshi, who seeks a topaz ring despite having no money. Now, to get the money, she becomes a call girl, and that's when the movie becomes an odyssey about the more abstract parts of Japan's urban underground. The movie was previously licensed by international art house distributor Kino on Video, but has since changed hands to G-Kids, who last year showed off a 2K restoration at film festivals. So Anno got involved with the movie after a friend recommended him one of Murakami's books, Fascism of Love and Fantasy. Anno became a fan of Murakami's and sought to make an adaptation of one of his books. After shifting through several of Murakami's books, of which many were too abstract or uncommercial to his liking, Anno settled on Love and Pop for being more realistic, in several ways. Not only was the story more down to earth, but he found it more easy to film and obtain sponsor money to help fund it. And Anno personally found that it would work better not as an animated movie, but instead a live action one. So one of the reasons why Anno chose to make it live action was because he really wanted to experiment with new filming techniques. Some shots in the movie are very Ava-esque, while some scenes are filmed in either first person, with fisheye lens, or shot a certain way because it just looked cool. And despite Anno's clout, the movie was produced as an independent film. The budget was about less than $1 million, and was shot using 6 video cameras simultaneously. Plus, it was edited on his totally new software called Avid. So Love and Pop, believe it or not, was one of the first digitally produced Japanese movies, mainly due to convenience and budget. After all, film cameras were way more expensive than usual compared to digital cameras, which everybody had at the time. The film received positive reviews when it came out, showing how Anno wasn't just skilled with paint and ink. Anno's second live-action movie would be 2000's Ritual, another art house film, but it has been released outside Japan, so we can skip it. After Love and Pop, Anno decided to return to anime directing, wanting to do something more down-to-earth and lighthearted. And wouldn't you know it, Gainax were right about to start production on a new, more optimistic rom-com anime. So this was His and Her Circumstances, or Karakano, as it's better known as. The show is based on a manga, Karashi Kanojo no Jiju, by Masami Suda. The anime is about Yukino Miyazawa, a top student at her school who sets out to be the best. And she is. Well, until Soichiro Arima arrives to steal the thunder. What starts as a plan to bring his reputation down a few pegs ends with the two falling in love with each other. The now couple spend the rest of the series trying to maintain their relationship while making some new friends along the way. So last I checked, the show is licensed by Nozomi Entertainment. But it's been so long since I made this panel that I have no clue who owns what anymore. Is Nozomi even still around anymore?
I think so.
Well, that's good. Yeah, I know the YouTube channel's still up, so there's that.
I think Dirty Pair was their last project.
Oh, yeah, before getting absorbed by Crunchy.
Yeah.
Oof. Now, compared to Evangelion, Isn't Her Circumstances is considerably more lighthearted and comedic. There's plenty of humor throughout, and the romance between the two leads is very sweet, but it also takes a step back and delves into who these characters are, their thought process and all that. And the show even incorporates some live action as well. It helped that Anno wanted to make something that was more fun and optimistic after the stress of Eva, while also incorporating his usual tropes and the stuff he learned while making Love and Pop. While unfortunately, like Eva, his and her circumstances was also beset by production problems. So, original author Masami Suda wanted anime to balance romance and comedy, while Anno wanted to emphasize comedy to avoid appearing saccharine. But he also wanted to use the show as a way to explore themes of relationships. The anime's plot follows the mangas until the halfway point, where it takes a different direction. Suda was angered by the changes, so much so that she wanted Gainax to fire Anno from the anime. Anno quit after directing 18 episodes, being replaced by his protege, Kazuya Tsurumaki. Under Tsurumaki, the show kind of lost its way, the last few episodes being clip shows before concluding on a very unsatisfying note. In the end, Tsurumaki couldn't save the series, as it was cancelled after 26 episodes. Suda would disown the show due to the massive creative differences she had with Anno, and while I'm not sure it was entirely the show's fault, his and her circumstances marked the final anime series to be directed by Anno, who would shift his focus to movies. Though that's not to say Anno rejected animation entirely. He would later provide voice work in cameos in anime like Fooly as he was the voice of Naoto's cat, and he would star in Hayao Miyazaki's The Wind Rises. He also would direct animated commercials, anime openings, even did some storyboarding for other shows. It felt like he had grown worn out from directing the series, which, given how difficult it is to helm an entire anime, it couldn't have been good for his mental health. But speaking of mental health, it would be around the turn of the millennium when Anno would start making steps to overcome his depression. In 1999, Anno returned to his hometown for a documentary series on NHK titled Welcome Back to an Extracurricular Lesson Senpai. While at home, Anno taught kids how to animate. He was started revealing more of himself than usual. Throughout the episode, Anno learned to embrace his inner child, explaining how nerds like him can still be capable of creating works that speak to many. It was also around this time when Anno met a very important figure, Moriko Anno. No relation, by the way. Born in 1971, Moriko is a manga artist and writer best known for Sugar Sugar Rune, Happy Mania, Flowers and Bees, and more. She married Hideaki in 2002, and they began to have positive effects on each other's works. Hideaki would help adapt Sugar Sugar Rune into an anime and serve as the show's storyboarder, while Moriko would steer his creativity down a more optimistic path. Moriko would later write the manga in sufficient direction based on her relationship with Hideaki. At this point, Hideaki's life would take a turn for the better, creating art that was more positive and lighthearted, with his next project being a movie based on one of the many artists who inspired him as a kid.
Warner Brothers presents Cutie Honey 2004年愛の戦士がついに目覚める
Yes, Anno's next movie after the artistic Love and Pop ritual was Cutie Honey, a 2004 movie based on Go Nagai's famed manga and anime series from 1973. Here, Honey Kisaragi is an idealistic, ditzy android who works at a temp agency. But when crime happens, she transforms into the powerful warrior of love, Cutie Honey. Honey must use her skills to stop the evil Panther Claw gang and its leader sister Jill after they kidnapped her uncle. And while this is a live-action adaptation, there are occasional animated bits by Gainax, such as the opening credits and some flashbacks. The movie is licensed by Bandai for a 2007 release in North America. So while the original Cutie Honey was a sci-fi themed magical girl series with plenty of blood and nudity, the movie was instead heavily inspired by Anno's love of tokusatsu. Several fight scenes harken back to the days of Ultraman, Super Sentai, and all those other shows that Anno loved growing up. And while the movie's fairly campy, Anno still incorporates its trademark introspectiveness. There's a part in the middle where Honey gets all sad and OB until she's given a pep talk by her new friend Natsuko. And Honey fights Sister Jill not with a sword, but by dissecting her motives. But like his and her circumstances, Kitty Honey uses these moments to reinforce its idealistic worldview. Good still triumphs over evil, and Honey's still able to overcome her personal troubles and maintain her optimism despite everything she's gone through. Oh, and Gonagai also gets a cameo where Honey's ass impacts his car windshield. So that's pretty cool. The film received mixed reviews upon release, with some claiming it to be fun and colorful, and others claiming it to be too cheap and ridiculous for its own good. Despite the reactions, the movie maintains a cult following who love it for its cheesy campiness. Now, Anno intended the movie to be the first part in his plan to bring Kitty Honey back to the limelight, because after this came the more famous three-part Gainax animated OVA, The Kitty Honey, which is a lot more nudity and violence than the movie, Kitty Honey A Go-Go, a manga remake which also included aspects of the original Kitty Honey manga, and there was also a tokusatsu comedy series called Kitty Honey Alive that also took inspiration from the movie's portrayal of Honey. However, The Kitty Honey would mark Anno's final project he did with Gainax. Anno wanted to move on, and to do so required cutting ties to the studio that gave him his career and form a new one, Studio Kara, which, by the way, is a word meaning joy, but in Hebrew it also means shit. Kara was established by Anno in 2006, with Anno leaving Gainax the next year once the studio was ready to go. Kara was comprised of several ex-Gainax animators and was formed by Anno to focus on projects he was passionate about. The debut title was to be a massive undertaking, a movie series based on a show that made Anno famous. So this is the rebuild of Evangelion series. So when Anno left Gainax, he was able to acquire the rights to Eva and all of its merchandise. So that meant he could do whatever the fuck he wanted with them. And this is what he did. The movies are mostly directed by Kazuya Tsurumaki, though Anno still served as co-writer and series supervisor. The movies themselves were an attempt by Anno to retell the original series without depression influencing the story, this time promising to instill a glimmer of hope. Anno was given a massive theatrical budget to tell the story in 4 movies. And also, Anno also wanted to revisit Eva as a way to show off new animation techniques and software to retell the story. Animation technology had come a long way since the 90s, and Anno really wanted to make good use of them. The rebuild movies were initially licensed and dubbed by Funimation, but are now licensed, of course, by G-Kids. Anno spent the late 2000s and early 2010s solely focusing on the rebuild movies, which by the middle of the new decade had mainly consisted of 2007's 1.0, Going Out Alone, which is basically an abridged remake of episodes 1 through 6 from the show, 2009's 2.0, Ikkicon Not Advance, which takes inspiration from the other episodes before heavily departing from the original series plot, and then 2012's 3.0, Ikkicon Not Redo, which continued the new storyline. It felt like Anno wanted to use the rebuild movies to show how much he had developed since the show's initial release, how his more positive outlook on life has allowed him to see his opus in a unique and different way. But unfortunately for Anno, old habits die hard, because he was once again stuck in production hell. While production of the first 2 movies went smoothly, the third one was the most problematic. 3.0 faced multiple script rewrites and unpopular creative decisions. And worse, Anno had another mental breakdown during production. Working on the movies brought back all the painful memories of making the original show, with his depression coming back in full force. And it got to the point where Anno often wouldn't even show up to work. This is also one of the reasons why 3.0 ended up being the darkest installment, and should also be a note that by this point, Kara were making their own decisions regarding Eva that was separate from Anno. Funimation's English dub of the movie had to be re-recorded after Kara was dissatisfied with it, causing the release to be delayed from February 2014 to February 2016. Why exactly they had to re-record it has been heavily debated, and any answer given mainly boils down to studio politics. So the movies as a whole, like the show, were critically successful, but proved controversial for fans. Some liked how different the movie stories and characterizations are, and welcomed the changes for being a unique twist on the franchise's story. Others saw them as a pointless cash-in that ruined the favorite characters, and it didn't help that Anno was so burnt out by this point that the 4th movie, Evangelion 3.0 plus 1.0, was put off to the side for many years as Anno ventured into other projects. For instance, in 2014, there were calls for a director to helm a Toho-produced movie based on a famous Japanese icon. Anno decided to jump on that call and direct his 4th live-action film, his grandest yet. That movie is...
Shin Godzilla!
Spoilers! make a Godzilla movie, Shin Godzilla to be exact, which came out in 2016. And while Anno wrote and directed it, he also had help from Shinji Higuchi, an old colleague of his from Daikon and Gainax, and who at this point directed many films with giant monsters like the live-action Attack on Titan movies. The plot is essentially a remake of the original Godzilla from 1954, with a giant creature emerging from the ocean to attack Japan. But this time, it focuses more on politics, as the government tries to stop this ginormous threat while trying to save as many lives as they can. It is actually the first Japanese Godzilla movie since the release of Final Wars back in 2004. The success of the 2014 American Godzilla gave Toho the confidence to provide the character themselves. The movie is currently licensed by G-Kids. So unlike the prior Toho Godzilla movies, where the big G was an anti-hero protecting the wolf from giant monsters, Godzilla is once again the main antagonist. While his backstory is relatively the same, Godzilla is portrayed here as a destructive monster with very little characterization who evolves from a bug-eyed lizard into a terrifying force of nature. He's basically treated like one of the angels from Eva. The plot is also fairly dark, about as much as the original, since it takes plenty of inspiration from the 2011 tsunami and earthquakes that rocked Japan. The central theme of the movie is how hard it is to be a hero, but despite the fact that the government wants to save everybody, there's a lot of red tape blocking their plans, and they ultimately have to rely on other countries to help them out. This version of Godzilla is used as a metaphor for natural disasters. Despite all the chaos and destruction, the movie ends on a pretty optimistic note, since it involves the citizens of Japan coming together to stop a giant threat. The film debuted in Japan in critical and financial acclaim, winning loads of awards such as Best Film and Best Director from the awards of the Japanese Academy, their version of the Oscars. More importantly, working on the movie, we kindled Anno's love of filmmaking, and combined help from his wife Moriko and Miyazaki, caused Anno to break free of his depression. A sequel was initially in the works for a while without Anno's involvement, but that would eventually morph into Godzilla -1, fully cementing Godzilla's comeback. But with his mental state fully recharged, Anno was finally ready. After years of delays, years of doubt, years of jokes poking fun at it, and years of mental recovery, there looked to be an end in sight for Anno's animated passion project. Evangelion 3.0 plus 1.0 was back in everyone's sights once again, with release date set for 2020. Fans are massively excited and expressed a lot of pride with several pieces of merchandise. After all these years, there looked to be an end in sight for Anno's longest running project. Things were really looking up, but then a little thing called COVID happened. The virus's spread results in a lot of tragedy, but to stay on topic, COVID's impact meant that a lot of big movies set for 2020 release had to be delayed to ensure public safety. 3.0 plus 1.0 just so happened to be one of them. It wouldn't be until early next year when the movie finally saw a release. So yes, 3.0 plus 1.0 was finally released in 2021 and given the subtitle Thrice Upon a Time. The movie came out to massive critical praise for its scale, epic storytelling, and awesome animation. But because history likes to repeat itself, the ending proved to be controversial for fans. Not as bad a vocal as the original endings, but look, there's never going to be an Eva ending that will satisfy everybody. But the most important thing is that the movie actually came out. After 14 long and painful years, the Revamp movies were finally over. And that would be it for Evangelion. Well, until Anno decides to do something else with the franchise. But after Eva, where does Anno go from here? Well, the success of Shin Godzilla led to Anno making a thematic Shin trilogy, where he was involved in movies based on properties he loved during his childhood. The second installment was Shin Ultraman, which Anno will co-write and produce, but he did not direct. Though he did, however, get to do mocap for Ultraman, and in a way reprising his role from the fan film he made back in college. What a nerd. However, for the next installment of his trilogy, Anno returned to director's chair to make...
僕の名はライダー仮面ライダーと名乗っててもらう
君は組織が開発した昆虫合成型オーグメンテーションプロジェクトの最高傑作だ。
これをかけると暴力の加減がまるでできなくなる。
その辛さあなたが背負うことで誰かが幸せになってる。誰かを多く戦うとはそういうことでしょ。
今から政府公認のアンチショッカー同盟だ。ではお見せしよう。変身。
人は人を信じることで生き延びてきた。
他人を信じることで裏切られてきた。
僕は人を守りたいと思う。自分の心を信じる。
ショッカーに生まれし者はショッカーに帰る。それが筋よね。
あなたも同じオーグメント。なのにこの幸せがなぜわからんのです。
裏切り
ては必ず殺す。やはり人間は面白い。
俺は俺なりのやり方で人類を救う仮面ライダー第0号だ。
あなたのプラン、魂の自由を取り戻してる。あなたを信じて、あなたに託す。仮面ライダー、本郷武さん。
So yeah, the third installment was Shin Kamen Rider, released in 2023. The movie's actually a reboot of the classic 1971 Tokusatsu series and celebrated its 50th anniversary. A little late there, but whatever. The movie's about motorcyclist Takeshi Hongo, who was kidnapped by the sinister organization Shocker, who were converting people to augmented cyborgs to add to their army. Takeshi used to be born as a grasshopper-themed cyborg who manages to escape. Seeking revenge on Shocker, Takeshi dubs himself Kamen Rider. He uses his newfound powers to stop Shocker's army and whatever they have in store. Now, one thing to know about this movie is that it has a very episodic storytelling. It's mainly about Takeshi fighting several different members of Shocker, Monster of the Week style, kind of like the original series. The movie is currently licensed by Amazon Prime. The movie is Kamen Rider goodness, but Anno once again put a bit of himself into the story. The film's main antagonist is Ichiro Midorikawa, aka Kamen Rider Zero, who was inducted into Shocker at a young age and who seeks to create augmented cyborgs in order to help rid mankind of its flaws. Because to Ichiro, humanity can only achieve perfection if everybody's happy, and those who refuse are to be killed. Meanwhile, Takeshi, as the hero, believes that flaws are what make us human. Despite now being a cybernetic super soldier, Takeshi's willing to give up his own life to protect humanity from losing what makes them special. Ichiro wouldn't be out of place in something like Evangelion, while Takeshi fits the mold of Anno's protagonists who keep up their heroism no matter what stands in their way. Now, unlike Shin Godzilla, Shin Kamen Rider's inception was a bit more divisive. One camp thinks that it's a fun throwback that maintains the spirit of the old series, while another camp thinks that Anno's fanboyism was too strong on this one, that felt more like a bunch of TV episodes edited into a movie, and that appeals more to die-hard fans rather than newcomers to the franchise. But what can't be denied is that Anno's passion for the franchise is on full display. There's clearly a hard point to this movie, but whether or not that saves it is up to you to decide. The movie did get some supplementary material, like There Is No True Peace in the World, Shin Kamen Rider Shocker Side, that's the title, a prequel manga that delves into Ichiro's backstory and how he got involved in Shocker. But as we approach the present, let's go over some stuff real quick. So Anno, as of today, has co-written and produced the 2025 Gundam series. I can't pronounce this fucking title.
G-Quacks.
I always thought it was GQ.
G-Quacks.
G-Quacks, okay. G-Quacks, whatever. So yeah, Anno's involved in this anime. It was directed by Kazuyo Shiramaki and co-animated by Studio Kara. Anno's doing well so far, but the same, however, can't be said for Gainax, who suffered tremendously throughout the 2010s, as key figureheads left to join other studios like Trigger. In 2019, one of the representative directors was arrested for pedophilia, and it turned out that the studio owed Anno and Kara millions in unpaid loans. Due to the financial turmoil, which is reaching a breaking point, Gainax would eventually shut down for good in December of 2025. An honestly pretty anticlimactic end for a studio that once dominated the 90s and 2000s. But at least Anno's still doing well for himself. Despite how controversial he and his work can be, Hideaki Anno still continues to be a legend in the anime and film industry. Evangelion has continued to inspire countless artists and creators to this very day, and even his non-Evo works like Nadia and Gunbuster, and His and Her Circumstances, continue to receive praise and admiration. Anno's life has been a real roller coaster, but his determinations kept him going despite the many mental issues he's faced. But the important thing is that Anno is an artist. He's extremely passionate about the stuff he gets to do, and he shows no signs of stopping. Thanks for coming, everybody. Exactly. I think it's also one of the last panels of the con, so thanks for showing up, guys.